Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically hopping into a financial time machine to look at the raw math behind human behavior. We're going to see exactly how microscopic, totally unremarkable financial decisions made in your early 20s silently compound over an 18-year period. And as you'll see, they create an absolutely undeniable, life-altering divergence in wealth. We're going to trace the exact steps of two different lives side by side to prove that wealth isn't really about what you make, it is almost entirely about the systems you build.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just the staggering magnitude of the chasm between these two people. On the left, we've got Path A at age 40, sitting on a net worth of over $1 million, with options that are just constantly expanding. Then on the right, we have Path B at the exact same age, with a net worth of under $60,000. They're living on incredibly thin margins, where even a single unexpected flat tire is a full-blown emergency. Looking at a massive financial gulf like this, you'd probably assume one of them inherited a trust fund or founded a tech startup, while the other just had terrible luck. But actually, that couldn't be further from the truth.
The reality is, they started at the exact same starting line. They both took the same entry-level operations job at a regional logistics company in the exact same city. I mean, the office probably smelled like the exact same old coffee and printer toner. They both reported to the same manager, Ellis, and crucially, they both walked away with the exact same first take-home paycheck, $1,847. The entire difference in their final destinations comes down strictly to how they directed that exact same amount of money.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline. To figure out how $1 million gap forms out of thin air, we really have to track their choices chronologically, starting right at the beginning in their early 20s.
So, here's the baseline at age 22. Path A, we'll call them the builder, decides to share an apartment for $740 a month. The kitchen's a bit cramped, but they don't really care. More importantly, they set up an automated $200 transfer to a Roth IRA the day after payday. They literally never even see that money hit their checking account. Path B, the spender, makes slightly different but completely normal choices. They really want their own space, so they rent a one-bedroom for $980. And they need a car, sure, but they opt for an upgraded trim level because, who doesn't want a sunroof, which locks them into a $387 monthly payment.
When you break down the math of those early choices, it turns out the foundational difference between Path A and Path B at the very starting line was merely $187 a month being redirected. Think about that. Path A didn't rely on extreme, monk-like discipline. They just relied on math. They automated a tiny slice of their income before they could even think about spending it. Path B, meanwhile, tied up their cash flow and fixed lifestyle costs right out of the gate.
By age 23 and 24, they both get the exact same $2,100 raise, and this is exactly where habits solidify. Path A doesn't upgrade their life, they upgrade their investments. They bump up those automated Roth IRA contributions and shift into total market index funds with a microscopic 0.03% expense ratio. Path B, well, they upgrade their apartment to a building with a shiny new gym that they quickly stop using, and they buy a $1,400 couch on one of those buy now, pay later plans. Of course, they forget exactly when the 12-month zero interest period ends, and bam, retroactive interest kicks in. Notice how it isn't massive windfalls changing the trajectory here. Path A's systems are building momentum, while Path B's are quietly building friction.
So the crucial point reveals itself right here in the data. Look at the staggering distance between them after just 2 years in the workforce. Path A has zero consumer debt, $4,500 in savings, and nearly $10 grand invested. That brings their net worth to a positive $14,300. Path B is drowning in a car loan and credit card debt, leaving them with a negative net worth of over $22,000. The financial distance between these two identically paid coworkers is already over $37,000.
Let's move the timeline forward into their mid to late 20s. This is a supercritical era. For Path A, this is where the quiet compounding really starts to take physical shape.
And this brilliantly illustrates the completely unsexy, mechanical reality of building wealth. At age 27, Path A buys a duplex. They don't do it with some lucky windfall. They just slowly save a $21,500 down payment over 19 months, leaving their index funds totally untouched. They hire a contractor named Marcus for $7,400 in cosmetic repairs. After the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and this is key, a strict 10% maintenance reserve, this property nets them $614 a month in cash flow. It's not perfectly passive, they're answering calls and fixing toilets, but the math is incredibly real.
Meanwhile, Path B is getting hit hard by the classic symptoms of lifestyle creep. They take a $2,100 trip to Cancun on a credit card that's actually already carrying a balance.
They end a car loan early, just to lease a brand new one, totally missing the fine print that hits them with a $2,800 early termination penalty. But the absolutely most devastating hidden cost? They open a 401k but only contribute 2%, missing out on their employer's full 4% match. Over just one single year, that's over $1,000 in free money they simply walked away from.
Now, life happens to both of them, right? Between 28 and 30, both of them face major stress tests. For Path A water heater completely gives out at the duplex. It costs $780 to fix. But because they built a system, the money comes straight from their pre-funded maintenance reserve. Literally zero panic. For Path B, a long-term relationship ends. Suddenly, they're stuck covering a $1,580 lease all by themselves. When three things break at once, they have absolutely no savings to lean on. They're forced to cash out $4,000 from their 401k just to stay afloat. They get hit with a brutal 10% early withdrawal penalty plus taxes, leaving them with way less than they needed, and they end up putting the rest on a high-interest credit card.
Let's pause right here and see how this builds into our midpoint check-in at age 30. The gap is now a mind-blowing $148,000. Path A has accumulated a net worth of $134,000, bolstered by acquiring a second property, which brings their monthly real estate cash flow to nearly $1,500. Path B is sitting at just $14,000 in net worth, completely weighed down by heavy credit card and car debt. What you really need to take away from this is that Path A's wealth is now large enough that it's going to grow autonomously. It's compounding quietly in the background, even if they never added another single dollar of their own money.
All right, let's push our time machine forward into their 30s. This is the decade of the grand divergence. The initial habits they formed way back at 22 have hardened into concrete, and the math completely takes over the wheel.
For Path A, this decade is basically a masterclass in silent compounding and optimization. They sell their first duplex for a solid profit and use a 1031 exchange to roll that capital, totally tax-free, into a 4-unit property. And here's the real kicker. Even as their net worth absolutely skyrockets, they are still happily driving a 2019 Camry with 94,000 miles on it because, hey, it runs perfectly fine. And they get smart about professional help too. They hire a fee-only financial planner named Ren for $4,800 a year, who immediately optimizes their depreciation schedules and saves them $8,600 in taxes.
Path B's decade, unfortunately, is defined almost entirely by friction. At 31, they roll $9,200 of credit card debt into an 11.9% consolidation loan. They feel this huge sense of relief, but they don't actually cut up the credit cards. A routine medical bill hits shortly after, and because they don't have cash, it goes right onto a card charging nearly 23% APR. Then, at 37, the worst happens. The company announces layoffs. Path B gets a 6-week severance, but because they have barely any savings and their 401k is locked behind huge penalties, that severance vanishes incredibly fast. It forces them even further into debt before their next job even starts. And look, Path B isn't lazy. They work incredibly hard. Life is just real, but the financial floor they're standing on is dangerously, dangerously thin.
And that brings us to the visual payoff of this entire 18-year journey. Just look at this divide. At age 40, Path A's investments in real estate equity total over $1,068,000. They are generating over $2,700 a month in purely passive income. Path B has a net worth of $58,700, almost entirely locked in a 401k that they can't even touch, and zero monthly passive income. That is over $1 million in difference generated from the exact same entry-level logistics job and the exact same starting salary.
The source material for our explainer today summarized this reality perfectly with this thought. Systems compound. Both kinds compound. That is the only thing that was ever true. Path B built a system at age 22. It was a spending system, specifically designed to consume every single dollar that came in. Path A built a building system, designed to quietly capture and multiply small amounts of money in the background. Neither person performed magic. Both systems simply did exactly what they were mathematically designed to do over a long period of time.
The difference wasn't a lottery ticket or a massive inheritance. It was a redirected $187, automated before the weekend even started. It was a discipline that never required heroism, just quiet, unrelenting repetition. So, looking closely at your own automated habits, your own unseen daily choices, which system are you building today?